The diamond in my mother's ring caught the light, but the metal beneath it was still damp with lake water. 20 years, she told us, it was gone forever, swallowed by the mud at the bottom of Blackwater Lake. But this morning, I found it sitting perfectly centered on my kitchen table. No note, no sign of forced entry, just the ring, and the faint, coppery scent of old pennies hanging in the air. My mother passed away last week. We buried her with her favorite locket. The funeral director assured me her hands were empty. So how did a ring lost 2 decades ago, a ring she wept for every single year, find its way back from the dark? And who, or what, decided it was finally time to return it? The air in the bank vault grew thick and still as the lock gave way. Inside lay a single, aged photograph of a woman with unfamiliar eyes, and beneath it, a folded document. My fingers, numb with a sudden dread, unfolded the paper to reveal a birth certificate. The date of birth stamped upon it was 6 months before my own. My parents, David and Helen Miller, were the living blueprint for a happy marriage. Our lives were a montage of perfect moments. Laughter echoing in the dining room, Christmas mornings glittering with tinsel, proud smiles at my graduation. The memory has a scent. Fresh cut grass, my mother's perfume, the warm, buttery smell of holiday baking. It was a world of solid ground and unwavering light before everything shifted. At least, that's what everyone in our little Ohio town believed. My father, the dependable accountant, who had a dad joke for every mundane moment. My mother, the heart of our home, her laughter a sound that could banish any quiet. They were my constant stars, my fixed points in a predictable sky. The promise that love could be steady, safe, and true now felt like a cruel echo. In her chic apartment, surrounded by half-filled boxes, Lily moved with a heavy weariness. Her mother had passed last autumn, taken by a sudden and brutal fight with cancer. The air in the room grew thick, carrying the faint, clinging scent of old paper and loss. We were devastated, but Dad became a ghost of himself. He'd sit in his study for hours, motionless, staring at the same patch of wall. He claimed he was handling the estate paperwork, but his voice was hollow, his eyes empty. The air in that room was always stale, thick with the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic. Then, just last week, he finally asked me to help him go through her things in the attic. He said it was too painful for him to do alone. The attic air was thick with the scent of old paper and forgotten things. We worked in a heavy quiet, broken only by the soft rustle of boxes. It was hard, but in that suspended, dusty silence, it felt right. We were honoring her memory, sorting through college textbooks, childhood art, and boxes of Christmas decorations. Then, beneath a stack of musty blankets, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, a lockbox I'd never seen before. Its presence in her things felt like a secret she'd taken to the grave. The air grew heavy with the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. The camera tightens on the lockbox. Simple, solid, unyielding. David's reaction stalls for a critical heartbeat, his smile hardening into a mask. Lily's voiceover cuts through the stillness, a quiet observation that carries weight. Dad went very still. He dismissed it with a forced chuckle. Just old financial papers from before we married. Worthless junk. But his hand was already dragging the box toward him, fingers clenched so tight the tendons stood out like cords. The air grew thick, carrying the scent of aged paper and something faintly metallic, like old coins left to tarnish. Every movement felt deliberate, as if he were guarding a secret too fragile for the light. I made a joke about finding buried treasure. He didn't even crack a smile. That night, Lily lay awake in her old childhood bedroom. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten dust. Every creak of the house settled into her bones like a cold, creeping dread. My father's panic echoes in my mind, an endless loop of quiet terror. That was the first secret I ever saw him harbor, a single door, sealed in a house where all others had always been unlocked. I couldn't forget it. The next day, while he was at his grief counseling, I looked. I knew it was wrong. But the key, taped behind his wedding photo frame on the desk, a place his fingers brushed every single day. The air smelled faintly of old paper and dust as Lily's hands shook uncontrollably. Her breath hitched in her throat, the sticky humidity of the room clinging to her skin. Then, with a sound like rusted metal grinding, she opened the lockbox. Inside, there were no papers, only a single, numbered key for a safe deposit box, and a small, folded map of downtown with one bank circled in faded red ink. The air grew heavy, carrying the scent of old paper and cold metal. Lily's voice cut through the quiet. It wasn't junk. It was a map and an invitation. The music vanished, leaving only the sterile silence of the vault and the intimate sounds of the moment. Her own breath was a ragged whisper in her ears, the only thing she could hear over the heavy, deliberate click of the key sliding home. Then came the deep, metallic groan of the vault mechanism engaging, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the floor and up her bones. The small, cold metal door before her swung open on silent hinges, revealing only a void of perfect blackness within. It turned with a solid, final clunk. The box was heavier than I expected. I carried it to the private room, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What are you doing?" One part of my brain screamed. "You have to know," answered the other. Lily lifted the lid, her fingers trembling against the aged wood. Inside lay a stack of letters, bound with a faded silk ribbon that felt brittle to the touch. Beneath them rested a black and white photograph of a dark-haired woman with an unsettling, knowing smile, and at the very bottom, a single, yellowed birth certificate. Resting atop the documents, gleaming in the sterile light, was her mother's platinum diamond wedding ring. The camera then shifted to the birth certificate beside it. Two typed lines stood out starkly against the pale form. Child's name, Michael James Miller. Date of birth, April 14th, 1992. The world tilted violently. All breath was sucked from the room, leaving only a vacuum of dread. A metallic scent, like ozone after lightning, coated the air. Then, from the crushing silence, a whisper, Michael James Miller. The record stated I was born in Austin, Texas. My father was officially listed. Yet, my father, this man, was born a mere 6 months before I entered the world. The impossibility of it settled in my gut like cold, wet stone. A metallic tang of ozone and old paper filled the air as the truth whispered from the page. My fingers closed around the ring, its metal biting cold against my skin. The memory of my mother's hand surfaced, that finger, naked for years after the loss. Her story echoed. The picnic by Silver Lake, the swing arcing over dark water, then the splash, the frantic search. A dread I now felt in the ring's icy weight. She mourned its loss, the grief thick in the still air. With trembling hands, she lifted the topmost letter, the paper cool and slightly brittle to the touch. She unfolded it slowly, the faint scent of old paper and forgotten ink rising into the air. The opening words, "My dearest David," seemed to whisper from the page, pulling her deeper into a past she could no longer grasp. The words on the page seemed to dissolve before her, leaving only their brutal truth. Her voice faltered, barely a whisper, as she read the final plea. "Please, don't forget us. Forever yours, Ellie." The room felt suddenly colder, the air thick with the scent of old paper and a creeping sense of violation. Then, the pieces crashed together with a sickening finality. He didn't lose the ring. He took it from her finger. He'd loved her enough to create a life, a child he abandoned. Returning to Ohio, to my mother, he assumed the role he felt destined for. He married her, placed this ring on her finger, and built an existence on a foundation of lies. When the guilt became too much to bear, he staged the loss. He let her grieve for 2 decades, a calculated cover for his sin. Her love was locked away in a cold vault, sealed within a metal box. Now Lily is back in her apartment, the haunting truth, a specter in the silence. The ring, photo, and birth certificate lay on her coffee table as dusk bled through the window, stretching shadows across the room. Lily stared at the camera, her face raw with emotion, the air thick with the scent of old paper and betrayal. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I haven't confronted him. What do I even say?" "Oh," she continued, the words sticking in her throat like bitter ash. "My dad, I violated your trust and discovered your secret family. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who held me at my mother's funeral, is a complete stranger. My entire childhood was a beautiful set, constructed on a rotten foundation." She picks up the photograph of Eleanor. The woman smiles. "Forever young, forever in love." Lily whispers, her voice barely audible in the heavy air. "Who is she? Is she still in Texas? Does Michael know about us? About me? Does he look like my dad? Like me? I have a brother. My father has another son. And my mother, my wonderful, loving, faithful mother, died, believing her greatest loss was a piece of jewelry at the bottom of a lake." The truth was, her husband's devotion had always been fractured, a portion of his heart perpetually absent. Now, that hollow space echoed with a final, terrible clarity. The metallic scent of rain through the open window, mixed with the faint, clinging odor of old perfume. Lily's voice was a raw whisper, frayed by the void. "So what do I do now? Should I bury this secret with her forever? Or do I open that door my father sealed shut 30 years ago and destroy the only family I have left?" The choice hangs in the air, thick with the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic, like dried ink or rust. My fingers, cold and stiff, trace the rough grain of the desk, feeling every splinter and imperfection. Somewhere deep in the house, a floorboard groans under an impossible weight, a sound that roots me to the spot. Do I leave it buried, or do I turn the key and let whatever my father imprisoned finally breathe?